What is up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Spike Down. We are now in episode number 8, and it is your usual suspects, Van Silly and Roy. Exactly 8 weeks already. I mean, it's only my second week, but Roy, you've been here since day one. Time flies, doesn't it?
Yeah, we've been chopping wood, carrying water for 8 weeks now, and it's I'm excited for another week. Blessed to be here.
Pyramid's getting built right now, but yeah, we're gonna make it simple for today. We're just gonna break down what happened in week number 1, get your thoughts as well, Roy, and then just do some predictions for week number 2, who we think is gonna take the upper hand, and then just end it there. I mean, it's simple. Simple as pie. I don't know how to make pie, but you know, I heard that it was pretty.
But
easy.
if you did know how to make it, it probably would be simple,
right? You just got to put the jelly in and put it in the oven, and you're donezo, right? But without further ado, let's go into it. I think you know, the biggest match that we saw last week was the M80 versus Oxygen Esports, and you know, it's been a close game. Two games that went the distance. Took the last round of regulation for that series to finish, but it was still a 2-0 finish for Oxygen Esports. For me personally, I don't think it's anything that's surprising, and I don't think it's anything that people should be afraid of like, oh my god, M80, they're like still in a slump, but they still played against Oxygen Esports, right? The team that won the mid-season cup. But I still wanted to have your take here, Roy. What did you think about the performances of M80, and do you think that they need to fix anything?
Honestly, okay. The first thing that comes to mind is it feels like Nismo's starting to find his groove again. I mean, to be fair, okay, it looks much worse than it really is, right? Like they got 2-0'd and it's kind of easy to dog on M80 because they're an expected favorite of the league. But I mean, dude, the first map was an OT game and the second map was a 13-11. Like that is literally as close as it gets. But obviously there are some glaring issues. Like one, I mean, why aren't they getting any rounds on their Lotus defense? But we'll get to that in a second. But I mean, I'm not really sure what is going on with M80, right? Like they on paper, everything seems good. They're just, maybe it's just like one of those unlucky things where like, you know how sometimes players all peak at the same time and now this team is like the GOATs, you know, like maybe they're just not having that kind of like luck where it's like, you know, one player is slumping, then next week, you know, this player is popping off, but this player is slumping. Like, I don't know what is happening, but something is not clicking internally. And, you know, they might just need to reinvent the wheel a little bit for themselves.
Yeah, but for me, I think this is just like a standard good Valorant game, although it looked very one-sided. I do agree with you. Like, if you look at that Lotus game, it was 0-10, I think, before M80 finally got around. But like I said, it was still a game that had to go down to the last round of regulation, which then mean on the other end, Oxygen Esports also was having troubles finding their rounds to score on the defensive side.
Yeah, they're struggling.
Exactly. They won pistol, and somehow at like what, a 11-1 scoreline, M80 was able to bring it to almost an overtime game. So I mean, you can't take anything away from that. At least take anything away from M80's performances, because you know they still showed tenacity in that game. I think if anything, the first game though, on the first map that went over the sunset, it felt like it was just one of those unlucky moments for M80, but a shiny moment for Oxygen Esports. Remember that round where Verno had a hero rifle and still gets 3 for his name, and then it allows here for the conversion of Oxygen Esports to get like a thrifty pretty much at that point, right? So sometimes you have like these hero plays, and Oxygen has that roster that's able to do that, where it doesn't have to be on Redux only, and the supporting cast, the initiator role of, for example, Verno at this point could really still step up to the plate as well. So I personally don't think that, you know, M80 needs to fix anything. I think it's just a scare, especially because of unfortunate results they've shown during the mid-season cup. But I think if they continue this way and they show that type of fight versus Oxygen Esports, and they fix those small things that, you know, Nitro has mentioned that they need to fix while they were in that boot camp session, then I think they'll be just fine. But at least, like, if Oxygen Esports still looks unstoppable since this mid-season cup, is there anything that you've noticed that we could actually maybe start exploiting and figure out how we could stop Oxygen Esports from being that top dog?
Honestly, it's kind of tough, man, because they're a very versatile team. Like the way they have so many different paces and styles, and like they're able to mask their defense. And there's just so many like layers to Oxygen. Like it'd be very hard to give like a 2-sentence statement to how to beat the best team in the league, right? But I mean, this is like to no surprise, right? Like we already predicted. I mean, mid-season cup, we already said very loud and clearly that Oxygen looks like the best team in the league right now. Like it seems like they're starting to pull pretty far ahead of everyone else, to be honest. I mean, just think about it, right? Like they got Verno, insane player on the initiator role, right? Redux, crack duelist. Mitch. I mean, I don't know what Mitch has been eating, but this dude is like he's just the father of the team, and he's he's 5-1 on opening kills on the IGL roll. He has 164 ADR on Sunset alone,
and
right?
He's like the veteran.
And he's supposed to be the veteran of the team and the IGL. And then what? You got Scuba, insane star player, controller player, and then Dapper, international winner on the Sentinel role. That's here to kind of like round out the team, right? Like. Man, I don't know, man. I don't think I'm equipped to tell you how to beat Oxygen in 2 sentences.
Yeah, I agree with you, because I kind of put you in a rut there, and I put you in the corner, but I agree with you that right now it's hard to find a solution as well. That's what I'm trying to get to here. It's like almost a rhetorical question that maybe you can't right now, because for Oxygen Esports as well, when you're looking, maybe it was just a one-off thing where they wanted to prove Core wrong by pulling out here a Clove on Lotus and then just brute force their way on their attack side. It looked like they were able to do the same thing against MED as well. So as much as you're like, hey, we're finally starting to figure out Oxygen Esports, but if they're pulling these type of compositions and these type of play styles, then for me, it shows that they're still in the lab and trying to make sure that they're still one step ahead of everybody else and not staying true to like a meta, which is why, again, we'll talk about it later, but, you know, shout out to Turtle Troop, of course, with the comp that it came out there on Ascent, and people are starting to use it. So you're starting to see teams like TTR, teams like Oxygen Esports, just trying to reinvent the meta, especially with the nerfs that came through recently on Viper, right? Because if you look at it from maybe 2 months ago when you were approaching your setup on Lotus, everybody was playing double controller with a Viper and an Omen, but you're seeing that a lot less, and people are experimenting what really kind of works into their playstyle. And right now, it seems to be the perfect fit for Oxygen Esports. Until they figure out that it doesn't work out anymore, they might still be a step ahead of everybody else. So you have to make sure that you have to think outside of the box, just to make sure that you're not only preparing in against the current comp that Oxygen Esports has, and that you build your own play style that just is a cookie cutter fit for anything that you're up against at this point. Good luck to all the teams trying to fight against OXG.
I guess my final note for the whole Oxygen debacle, though, is like, I think the meta really fits them, to be honest. I think we're kind of shifting into the double initiator meta, right? I guess we're coming back to the double initiator meta. But that fits their roles so well. And I think that it's such a good meta for them, because their roles are just, everyone's in a comfort role. Like there's no one that has to compromise really for the team. Like we're all on like our best roles essentially, right? So I think that's part of their strength here.
Yeah. At least, if anything, when you're seeing the resurgence of a double initiator role, a lot of this double initiator seems to be this Gecko in Breach, because right now Breach has had a resurgence going into this double initiator meta, because it seems to almost be a direct counter to a Wingman plan, or also a Gecko going into the Thrash. You're trying to deny all that already. So keeping at the core of those two initiators and developing around that to try to build your own play style too, I think that's where you're going to start finding some success, at least on these maps where Gecko is very prominent, right? So that's something to look out for sure for the upcoming weeks. But let's move forward here to the next matchup that we were able to witness last week. It's Fame, so Fluffy Aimers versus Winthrop University. Cool enough here, we actually had an extra roster change, as you know, it wasn't just Screwface that was the most recent addition going into the midseason cup, but this time they actually picked up Silence as well. Silence had an opportunity to ring for Turtle Troop while we was on vacation for those 2 weeks, and he put up numbers, and he still put up numbers. He's actually the top fragger in the server in that matchup overall in across 3 maps. So do you think now that Winthrop has done, I'm assuming, again, a rhetorical question, have they done a good job here scouting Silence, and how do they look now as a unit and can they make a deep run in stage 2 with what you've seen this week?
I mean, okay. First of all, I think Silence might be the best pickup that Winthrop could have gotten for that role, to be honest. Because like, not only is he a really fundamental like controller player, but he's totally down to scrap, and he's totally down to like, you know, kind of find his groove. And that was kind of his previous weakness, right? It's like he was a little too fundamental back in the 100 Thieves 6-man days, right? Where he was like a little too structured, a little too predictable. But like once you play on Turtle Troops, you kind of get that X Factor genes that whatever that team is having in their DNA, you kind of get some of that on your side, right? And now he's bringing that to Winthrop University. And you got Screwface, you got Infiltrator, who's kind of a crack duelist. And then you obviously have like a good support system with Nasi going on that roster as well. So I think Winthrop's on the uptrend right now, and that Silence was a great pickup for them, and it shows.
Yeah, I think this is like the underlining fact, actually, from after the matches that I've witnessed this week, is that every single one of this team every single one of these teams rather seems to be on the upward trajectory, because this is a great victory that we saw from Winthrop University. Fluffy Aimers on the other end, I think it's very similar too. Like they haven't gone through any roster changes, but they've gone through role changes where you're actually adding a lot more support roles, initiator roles for Will, for example. But overall, they seem to have some good synergy overall, and are starting to build a little bit more in terms of that macro and the approach that they want to have towards their maps. Because again, looking back at the MSC, these guys were just running around and just fragging out, and they were making it very competitive and really took some teams to the distance, right? I mean, this was, if I'm not mistaken, a rematch as well between Fluffy Aimers and Winthrop, right? That Fluffy Aimers took over last time. So this is a nice little revenge for Winthrop University, but also at the same time, you're starting to see that not only with the addition of Silence that Winthrop looks good macro-wise, Fluffy Aimers are starting to develop their own style as well. And, we've seen one of those games where, everybody's just, once again, using the TTR comp. I'm pretty sure Fluffy Aimers, if I'm not mistaken, were the ones that also pulled out a deadlock here on the map of Ascent against Winthrop. And where
you're confusing,
unless it was YFP, sorry.
Yeah, you're confusing Fluffy Aimers with YFP. Honestly, I almost made that mistake earlier too, because they're, for some reason, they're in the same team in my head, but no, they're a different team.
It could be a 10-man roster at this point between both of them, but nonetheless, I think it still stands that they were able to still bring a better team synergy, and on top of that, a better approach here to their maps that, we're starting to see better development coming out from Fluffy Aimers. Analytics aside, I mentioned my last point, but analytics aside, that was honestly a really fun game to watch. It was 13-11 on the first, 13-10 on the second, OT on the third. Like that was great Valorant. It was exciting Valorant, no doubt. But yeah, we can let's move forward here. If anything, that's a good idea. I should at least remind here the chat what the scores were if anybody didn't watch it here over the last few weeks. So that if you know the scores and you see the comps that we're talking about, you have a chance here to watch the VODs as well as you can find here on this channel. So the next one I want to talk about is that YFP. So I was a little bit too early to the punch, but it's YFP now taking that TTR role, the TTR composition, playing on Ascent, looking very good, doing it at the same time, because sometimes when you're copying, like when you're trying to copy the meta, or you're like, oh, Sentinels plays this way, let's try to do this, but then you can't really copy the same style as Sentinels play because you don't have the same players, and you're not the same players as the one on the Sentinels rosters. But I do like what I saw from YFP, that it looked 100%. Almost pretty much carbon copy of how they played that map, and they played it very well.
Yeah, and I think not only, it's kind of how innovation works in these sort of games, right? Like, yeah, you might steal somebody else's team, but you're going to have your own flair to it, and like your own spin on it. And that's sort of like the way the innovation happens in kind of like in Valorant, right? And I think that's what's happening here is like, yeah, they kind of just yoinked a Turtle Troop comp, but they do have their own little spin to it. They didn't just copy paste the setups. They didn't just copy paste the strategies. Like they do have their own flair. Will has his own flair on the deadlock. Like it looked pretty promising, to be honest. And I think YFP is the one team that is actually on a really good trajectory. Like they look so good. And obviously SAD Esports, they're kind of in a bit of their own slump with the most recent roster changes, like losing Bob and also losing Zostal.
Yep.
So they're going to have a bit of like a construction period, if you will. But I mean, on the other hand, YFP looked amazing. So
what's your first take though on those roster changes, right? Because you just mentioned losing Zostal and losing Bob. They brought in Dip and Alvin Boy, and Dip, for me, as I mentioned before, before we previewed those games last week, Dip for me is a great initiator / Sova IGL that I've seen do great impact in the collegiate scene with Northwood University. And now that he has a chance to regroup with Darkest, I think that combination, that duo of initiators is going to already propulse SAD Esports into better heights. Not necessarily saying that the other ones that they're replacing weren't good enough. It's just it wasn't a right fit to apparently what SAD would be looking for here. So they have an opportunity to already have that old chemistry that they could rebuild between these two. And Alvin Boy, who has been playing so much duelist roles, but here in these games played a Sentinel view for SAD Esports. So what do you think about the performances of these two players and how it kind of looked? I know there were still losses here against YFP, but any hope that you have right now after seeing their performances?
Yeah, so for the record, by the way, it's actually Darkest who's IGLing for the SAD Esports roster.
Oh, interesting. I did not know that.
It's actually kind of his debut in the IGL role. He has never really done it like exclusively. He's always been a very vocal player. Okay, he's an extremely vocal player. He's very good at mid rounding, and I think it's kind of a natural transit. I mean, if you're good at mid rounding, you're already doing 90% of the IGL job, right? Like anyone can call in freeze time. Let's be real here. But yeah, I think it's a pretty natural transition. But I do think it's one of those transitions where like it's going to require time, sadly, and I don't know if time is something they can afford right now.
Did you get what you just did? It requires time, sadly, for sad esports.
My brain, it works in mysterious ways. I don't even plan this, fans. That's the cool thing.
Ready to be a dad.
I got the father genes. I got 2 fur babies. But
sorry to continue.
No, you're good. Like I like what they're building. Honestly, I don't hate it. It's just a time thing. I think Dip fits pretty well into the roster. They're a very vocal team. They just got to figure out like what's going on, and they need to chop. Like time is ticking right now.
Do you feel that at this point you need time for the IGL to get comfortable, but at the same time, do you feel that there's going to be not necessarily only communication issues, but maybe role issues too? Because again, this is Alvin Boy playing as a Sentinel role where he's known to be a star duelist as an up-and-comer in that sense, and at the same time now has to split those responsibilities or just have that taken away because they want to give it to Skarn. And then you saw Kolberg that used to play Sentinel role going to a smoke role now, and now it seems to be convoluted, especially when you're telling me that Darkus is now IGLing for the team. So you only have what, 4 weeks left, right? Going before you finish your 5 weeks. So time's ticking at this point. And what would be the first thing you want to fix at there, or not necessarily fix? What would you want to work on to make sure you have the fastest results if you're an IGL for a team here and you're faced with these issues?
I honestly, if I'm them, I'm just sticking to their strengths, right? Like they're all very good mid rounders. They have a lot of vocal players. I would just adopt a pretty slow play style and just like figure out, okay, like this is our default. This is what we're doing. Like these are our options when we know they're doing this or they're doing that. Just to kind of figure out their little protocols and on the most basic level possible. Like, dude, Kolberg his role is completely fine. Like he's been a controller player / Sentinel player his whole career. Like he's totally chill on that. Alvin is actually surprisingly like he has played duelist, but he's also played Sentinel. So it's not like they're flexing to roles that they're like totally unfamiliar with, right? Like I think they're kind of fine. Like they need to figure out like the simplest way they can get results, find that default, find those protocols, find like that pace that you can kind of like big brain some of these teams and play to your strengths and just go from there, to be honest.
Yeah. At least one of those players that actually had to kind of like adapt on the fly into a different role and I think was used to play more initiator role and had to play a controller role was actually Sherb. And that's the next match I want to talk about here because it's the TSM versus Blinn, right? We prefaced this last week, Roy, when we had the conversation that, these two teams are for us, the underdogs of the stage two. Me being TSM, exactly. The dark horses of the stage. Me for TSM, you for Blinn, because you saw what Blinn was able to do against TTR over in the mid-season cup. And, unfortunate circumstances to what happened where they had to do an emergency switch between Aproto and Sherb. But good news is that Aproto seems to be all right. So I'm super happy to read that and to hear that from Aproto. But Sherb now focusing on him. I mean, he did the job. He had to play an Aster role starting at 0-8 and ended up like, I think at 3-4, something like that overall in the last rounds that they started to lose, unfortunately, on Breeze on their map pick for TSM. But once we got over to that split game, I think he played a pretty decent game. But this should have been a game then on paper that should have been a little bit easier for Blinn to take over, yet they didn't find those results. So what's your take now, and what's your pulse when you think that the dark horse being Blinn, can they still be that dark horse now, or are you leaning more towards the TSM and on the TSM train with me?
Okay, first of all, I'm really happy for Aproto. Okay, I'm glad the dude's okay. I like the kid. He's a very nice guy, right?
Of course.
But that being said, I do think that this loss from Blinn is actually a really bad sign for them, right? Like that might have been your quote unquote last by the universe, right? Like I know it's kind of like bad context, but like that was supposed to be the easier match considering the context. Like you have who the heck is Sherb? I've never seen Sherb. You've never seen Sherb.
It's Sherb.
I mean, no, jokes aside, he's Sherb. But I mean, he's a tier 3 player, so he's not completely like unknown. But like, dude, you're throwing this kid in among wolves, right? In a very important match, and you're still winning. Like that's kind of a bad sign for Blinn. Like that should have been a cleanup, all things considered. Like it didn't, despite the unfortunate circumstances that were happening, obviously. But I don't know. That's a little worrisome. But that being said, their second map, 13-5 on their Breeze, like their Breeze attack was beautiful. It was a beautiful Breeze attack for Blinn.
For sure.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I don't know how much more I can say, to be honest.
Yeah, especially this is how I preface this matchup was, you know, having a chance to speak to the TSM coach and also to GMD. I'm like, hey, what map do you guys like to play? Because it seems as though you guys are playing a lot of Lotus these days during the stage 1. They're like, yeah, well, if we had a chance, we want to take it to Breeze because we feel that that's our best map. And then people like to ban it against us, so we have to choose a second best, which is at this point having to play and getting used to a little bit more of Lotus at this point. But now they have a chance to, you know, play their favorite map, and they got decimated on the defensive side. And that's just to show how good Blinn were on these heavy executes and coordination that they were able to get here towards this B site. And continuously overwhelm here TSM on those takes, and it seems though TSM really didn't have an answer into, you know, the not necessarily the basic stuff, but just the coordination that Blinn was having towards these site takes, especially when you're looking at those Hunter's Furies takes towards the left side of the lane, especially those big pops when the Hunter's Fury is available too. So I think despite the loss that should have been theirs here for Blinn Esports, it still shows that, you know, they have to work on a couple of things to make sure they're able to close out series, but at the same time, at least they're still showing that they could be competitive in some sense versus TSM. But we'll look later once we get into the week 2 predictions to see what team they're going to be playing against and what their chances are going through. But yes, I do agree with you that this would have been a great start for the momentum and the confidence here for Blinn Esports if they could close it against TSM, because it's almost like, you know, having you know, back then when Sentinels were trying to figure things out, then unfortunately Pancata wasn't playing anymore, and then Rory or Def had to play for a bit, and that makes things already very hard to do as a core for Sentinels, as a unit for Sentinels to get things going. I don't know why I'm always referencing Sentinels, but they seem to play an impact, a heavy impact.
We found the fan.
Exactly. What does Sentinels play? No, but then for TSM side, it's very similar, right? So they have somebody that you never heard of that's always played Initiator, comes in and has to fit into a Proto Shoes, and is able to do a good enough job for TSM to pull this through and win it. So I think this tells a lot for TSM, how much more you had to bring up to the plate. Even GMD was tweeting after the series. He was like, hey, I wasn't shooting the best, although he kind of did on Bind. He's like, I wasn't shooting the best. The calling was okay, but we still pulled it through. So imagine now the next time when TSM has their full strength and a Proto comes back, and then it seems as though there's still a sky as a limit so far for TSM to continue forward here in the stage 2 to make it to the playoffs. And now let's focus on another game. Another game where, you know, when I started this game and I was like, this should be an easy 2-0, right? This is one of the best 4 teams that you currently have in the league. It's Moistex Shopify. They're gonna have to play against Dobros, a team that was relegated and had to go through relegation, fight back, only had an okay mid-season cup. So this should be a 2-0, right? And then no. So MXS still needed 3 maps to beat a team like Dobros, but I think this comes to show how Dobros looked so good and so much better going into this week, because even not only did they come out from play-ins, but they also came out with a new composition too, bringing out Deadlock and a Clove on Lotus as well. Lotus. So I want to know your thoughts about this Dobros team now and the innovation that they bring and their chances going into stage 2 after seeing their performances on stage 1.
Yeah, do you remember when we were talking about Dobros in the midseason cup, and we were saying how like they lack that X factor, and they should kind of like lean into their own style and stop trying to like, you know, copy their traditional style. Like I think they're finally coming. Yeah, I think they're finally coming. I don't want to take credit for that, but I think that we are coming. Like they're coming to the same conclusion that we're coming to. Where it's like they need to make people play their style. They can't play meta Valorant. Okay, they need to kind of develop their own flair, their own play style, and try to like really leverage that, because they don't have that super crack duelist. Don't get me wrong, Zachary's doing amazing. He's doing a great job, but like he's still not putting the numbers that like Mata is putting up, which is like in comparison, Zachary's stats 135 ADR versus Mata's 212 for that best of 3, right? Like they need to lean into that sort of like unknown territory, like reinvent the wheel a little bit and force people to play in that little uncomfort zone. And I think that's kind of what happened, right? Like 13-4 on Lotus, like clean defense half. Moist didn't know what to really expect. They didn't even know how to play against that composition exactly, to be honest.
Yeah.
But as soon as you go into Breeze, now we're going into like a more meta-ish map. They get 13-2'd. Crazy. And then we go into the third map, Ascent. That's the cookie cutter map. Everyone knows how to play that. Moist pulls out the TTR comp as well, by the way, which is what happened. Everyone's using the deadlock comp now.
Dude, actually, I want to know your thoughts. It seems as though in Challengers now in North America, there's a lot more deadlock trying to be picked here on different maps, not only just on Ascent after TTR came out with this, but then you know, sometimes some people are trying on Lotus, like of course Dobros just did with Drone on that agent against the MXS, and you know, just in stage 1 there's been some testing of deadlock on Icebox that EG also pulled out during the VCT. So for me, if you're looking at the buffs or the tweaks that they did onto deadlock, it wasn't that big of a tweak, but was that enough for people to start seeing the value of deadlock on or at least being played in competitive play?
I'm not sure. I think people have this like intuition that deadlock is good. They just haven't really found out how to fully utilize your kit, if that makes sense. But I think now that they've sort of like Turtle Troops have sort of opened up everyone's eyes in terms of how it can be used and how it can be paired with another like Sentinel, I think people are realizing like, okay, maybe there's some truth to the deadlock kit and we just need to figure out like what to do with it. But I mean, on Lotus, it seemed pretty good, right? Like it pairs really well with the Raze. They had a lot of like Raze combos, and they like not only does deadlock pair well with the Raze, but so does Fade with the tether. So they have like 2 forms of like tether nade combos essentially, right? Yeah. So like that's pretty scary. Like you're trying to run up B, you get tether naded. You try to go up C, you get tether naded in the post plan or in the retake. Like any spot could just get snap finger, boom, that position is cleared. I think people are just realizing that deadlock has potential, and they're just trying to figure out how exactly it has potential.
Yeah. Maybe sometimes limit it to kind of like a Clove, for example, with the metal that could be very situational and how you can use the kit. But because I still feel that it could be kind of weak on the rest of our kit around like the sonic sensor. The wall's still very good, of course, but the trips are still hard to utilize because people could just walk through that, which is why some of these teams are still running double sentinels, especially when it comes down to a map like Ascent, when TTR brought that out too, right? With the Cypher and now the deadlock. But, you know, we talked about, you know, a resurgence of, or a surge, should I say, before a resurgence of deadlock. And one team tried to use her on a different map, and that's going to be Core. So let's talk about Core versus TTR.
Okay, I like it.
Nerve tried to bring out the deadlock on Bind. And looking at the interview and the post-game interview that Stellar gave to Sierra Dawn, he was like, yeah, I'm not too sure why Core pulled out the deadlock on this Bind, and
really
rethink it. But but for me, I still see the value of it, right? As you're trying to explain it, where, you know, it's important to have the grav net and the combinations that you could use with this, rather, there's still an opportunity to do like a simile of what the Fade kind of does and what 100 Thieves does with that Fade sees and, let's say, an orbital strike from a Brimstone. But there wasn't too many opportunities that Core was in a position that they could utilize any of those trap plays that they could do with the GravNet. So I think the idea or the thought behind using a deadlock in that matchup against TTR was nice, but just unfortunately for Turtle Troop, it feels like they kind of understood it, and also maybe Core wasn't ready to play against the composition that Turtle Troop also brought out on Bind, because B-Dog pulled out a Sage, going back to even 100 Thieves days of Stellar using the Sage on in their compositions on Bind in the past. So I want to know your thoughts after you've digested that series.
I have a lot of thoughts on Bind specifically. Okay, I'll start with number 1.
Okay,
Core are no strangers to the Sage on Bind. There really should be no excuse to why they feel out of comfort. They ran the Sage for years, dude, on that map. They should be completely comfortable with how to play against Sage on Bind.
Was that number Zip 2? That was playing her? I can't remember.
No, it was their previous. It was a different iteration of their roster back then.
Okay.
But 2, you pull out the deadlock against Turtle Troops? That's crazy talk. That is crazy talk. They made deadlock.
Yeah.
You gotta try something else against them. That is wild. So I mean, like the first half was 11-1. That by Turtle Troops, and then 11-1 attack half on Bind. Like, hey, the map is kind of attack sided, but not 11-1 attack sided. Okay?
Yeah,
that was insane. Corey went huge on that map, by the way. Shout out to that boy, 23 and 8 on the Raze, 260 ADR.
I think it was like 19 kills in 8 rounds or something like that, if I'm not mistaken. If I remember the cast in itself, because it was like yesterday. It was literally yesterday, wasn't it? Dude, time flies by. Dude, I haven't slept.
So many games. It's just hard. It's hard to keep up at times.
Yeah. But at least he was putting out numbers, but also the calling that was coming out from Turtle Troop was sick because
it was stellar.
The stellar pistol round when they actually countered the wall that went. So you guys have to check it out. Check out the VODs. Just look at the pistol round of how they sold that fake with the wingman on for Turtle Troop against this team of Core. It was sick to watch, and they've done something very similar on their third map on Icebox when Stellar was also using a gecko. The second map was Adder, but the third map was Stellar, and it did a very similar fake. And keep an eye on that as you watch these games. But that, we had 2 maps that were very one-sided, but the third map was an all-out brawl, man. At this point, I don't know where to rate Core and where to rate TTR, because they kind of like just dominate on their map picks with these unorthodox comps and utility, and then suddenly it's just an even map, more standard, quote-unquote, and then it was just a brawl on both ends from different styles of clashing too, right? You had a double controller on one end versus a double flash on the other end, and it worked pretty well. I mean, it still came down to the distance.
Yeah, I was going to say that Icebox is actually a beautiful game, like for people that like to nerd out over strategies, because those 2 comps are actually like the new meta comps on the map. Like people are either leaning into the Harbor on that map, or they're leaning into like the Gecko KO or the Gecko Sova. Like those are pretty much the only comps people are playing on that map. So to see it clash in OT just shows how much comp variety and how much like style variety there actually is in Valorant, which is super cool.
Yeah, so we'll have to see right now. I mean, I think my stocks for Core stays similar at a decent spot. TTR, I don't think it went down for a bit at this point. I still think they're one of the top dogs. Again, after being thrashed on the first map and then coming back here on the second one and winning the third, and such a great IGLing battle between both Stellar and T-Dog to win this in overtime was kind of sick. So you guys have to rewatch that game, because yes, it was a long day, but it was worth the wait to finish in that third map in that type of style. But now let's look at week 2. So we have a couple of games coming up towards this schedule. I mean, we're going to be pretty busy going into that week number 2. That's June 4th to June 6th. And as we're looking here at these or at these matchups rather, is there any type of game that really comes up to mind, or that really pops out for you that you want to keep an eye on?
Yeah, there's actually 3 games that are like immediately my eyes are like they're lasered in on it. Okay, there's Moist Shopify versus Turtle Troops on day 1. That one's got to be it. That has to be a certified banger. Okay, it has to be.
Yeah.
Number 2, Blinn versus M80. Right, like I mean, both games on that day are pretty sick. YFP versus Winthrop University, Blinn versus M80. I think both those games are pretty interesting. Obviously, Blinn is my dark horse pick of the stage, and then they're going up against M80, who is obviously they're having a bit of, they're not really playing to their best ability right now. And then on the third day, which is on Thursday, that's Oxygen versus TSM. That's that. That has to be a good game. That has to be a good game.
You like for it to be, right? You like for it to be, because we've been gassing up TSM, but they still have to play against Oxygen.
So Oxygen, best team in the league.
This should be a tough one. Exactly. It should still be Oxygen at this point. But no, I do agree with you. If there's one that really pops out of those 3 that you've mentioned, I think it's to keep an eye on the Blinn versus M80. Again, it was a matchup that fell short here for Blinn Esports. They had an opportunity to win against TSM, but they still showed that they have great communication and great macros to approach these maps. And now they're playing against an M80 that's still trying to figure things out. So this is another great opportunity for them to take advantage of that and try to find those weaknesses and study that tape. I mean, they have a good team, good brains to work behind all of this, and to potentially, hopefully, find those gaps that they could take advantage of against M80 to be able to win that game. But I think what you're also trying to say here, Roy, is that we should tune into every single day, because
yes, exactly what I'm trying to say.
Certified bangers every single one of these days for at least one of the matches, right? But I'm also intrigued about the Core Dobros with the results that Dobros have been putting up here against MXS, and for a Core that's been working out some new approaches. I think this is going to be really fun to watch too. So yeah, I think these matches, there's not really one I'm like, this should be very one-sided. Maybe unless you go into that third day. the Fluffy Aimers versus. I mean, let's go into predictions. We'll go into that.
All right, I like that. I like that. That seems logical.
So, yeah, so let's go into that first day. So if we're looking at Core and Dobros, I've already mentioned it. I think this should be very, very close for both of these teams.
Agreed.
Dobros, they have convinced me that they are able to come up with new things and look very, very good. And despite not having like a star fragger for the team, I feel that there might be an opportunity for Dobros to. I'd like to call this an upset against Core.
Okay, honestly, I always respected your optimism. I'm a bit more of a realist myself, so I'm going to go with. I have always appreciated your optimism, but I'm going to go with Core on this one. I think they just look like they are a very well-rounded team to the same level that Dobro is, but they have that X factor and they have that crack duelist, and I think that should be the edge that they need to get that win.
Yeah, I mean, I forgot they do have Zeldris, don't they, for Core? But you know what? I've already locked it in, so we're
already locked in, dude.
On my side. So we'll be on each side of the coin, and then just like our dark horses, and then I won last time, so we'll see. The second one, MXS versus Turtle Troop. This is a tough one to pick.
This is. I think I need like a second to. I'm kind of calculating all the elements. Q math meme.
Q math meme, and while you cue that meme, I'm just gonna say it's going to be a Moist X Shopify victory. Just because,
really?
Well, because the reason why I'm saying this is I can't lose, right? Because if I go for MXS and they win, then I get all the praises from Ludwig and from Tarek. But if I lose, then at least we did shakes my hand and be like, oh, thank you for voting against us, because we know that every time you vote against us, we win. So technically, I kind of win on both ends.
Genius. Absolutely genius. I love that.
Now, the other meme where I go like this.
Yeah. See, you're thinking the right way. I'm thinking the wrong way. I'm thinking Valorant. You're thinking, I love that. That is huge. That's big brain.
I'm gaming the system.
Yep. I love that. I love that. That's why they say never actually try to be good at school. Always try to beat your professor. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
But yeah, I'm gonna go with Turtle Troops on this one. Listen, I'm saying first of all, I'd like to apologize to We Did, because they almost lost the last match because I voted for them. So now you know. Now I'm voting for them again, and they're probably going to lose this one. And We Did. I'm so sorry, man. You guys have convinced me. You guys are good at the game. I believe in you. And if you guys start losing, I will take full responsibility for the analyst curse, or I don't even know what I am at this, but the content creator curse, the triple C's, dude.
Yeah, but, exactly.
yeah, that's where I'm at right now.
It feels like me trying to vote for or against footballists right now in our foot esports rather at Master Shanghai, dude. They are always going against what I'm going for, and unfortunately today, just well, I guess this is a pre-recording, but by the time you read this or hear this, and by the time we recorded it, they just upset Fnatic today. So that's unfortunate. Anyways, going back into the next one, YFP versus Winthrop University. This is a tough one to call as well. They are looking really good right now for Winthrop. Screwface finding his groove. Silence is amazing. But YFP, it's time for them to get more wins. I think getting one on stage one was not enough. Getting close games also into losses in these O2 series, where they should have at least gone one map, but it's been just so hard for them to get through that hurdle. And once they've gone through these roster changes and finally also gone through compositional changes, they're looking pretty good so far, and they've been in the lab. So I'm going to put my faith into YFP for this game against Winthrop. And Moves is
I agree with that as well.
Over at Winthrop. So wait, I
said
bad. YFP, right? Did I just say YFP?
Yeah, you said YFP. You said YFP.
Okay, perfect. That's
yeah. No, you said YFP. I'm on the same page, so we can just move on to the next match.
Perfect. Blinn M80. I think as much as we're gassing up in the 80 opportunities here for Blinn to upset M80, I think this is still an M80 win.
Oh, okay. Listen,
it's your dark horse. Are you going to go for your dark horse?
I have to. I literally I have to go for them. I have to go for Blinn. Okay. I think Oki's the kind of player. He's like, you know, when you play tennis and you play against somebody who's bad at tennis, right? Like when you play against a bad tennis player, tennis becomes harder because like you guys can't hit the ball properly. But when you play against good tennis players, it gets easier because you're both really good at striking. I think the same thing happens with Okeanos. He's like, whenever he plays against good teams, he's like a Super Saiyan, dude. He goes superpowers, like, and kid's fast, dude. He's fast. You finally? All right, let's go.
Yeah. So technically, you're trying to tell me that Okeanos is going to pop off.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. Saying.
on the other end, because M80 are still trying to find their footing, maybe they're also stepping on their left foot a lot and on the wrong foot and not maybe swinging as well. So is Okeanos at this point not going to pop off as much? And in the supporting cast from both teams, you're going to lean towards M80.
No, I'm still going with Blinn. I'm going with
Whatever
Blinn.
happened to
I'm
Logic
locking
the
it
Rapper,
in.
by the way?
Oh, he's
As you say, Logic.
he had a family. I don't know if this how you meant.
Fluffy Gamers versus Sad Esports. Who we got here? Who do you got for the next one? Fluffy Gamers or Sad?
Fluffy versus Sad. Fluffy versus Sad. I'm gonna go with Fluffy Gamers.
Yeah, I think so too.
I love the boys on Sad, but
same. I think they still need, let's say,
under
one more
construction.
week. One more week, and then we'll be maybe yeah, because I mean, you saw the schedule earlier on. The following week they're going to play against Blinn Esports, so if they figure things out quite well against a strong opponent like Fluffy Gamers and work out those kinks, I think it'll be looking pretty good against Blinn next week, and we'll have to revisit that once we get into Spike Down episode number 9. And last but not least, Oxygen Esports versus TSM. TSM's my dark horse, but I got to be a realist this time around, not an optimist. This is going to have to be an Oxygen Esports win.
What? You're letting the world ruin you, Vance? Your optimism is just going to get taken away from you like that? That's crazy. That's crazy. he said optimism. Who? I don't know them.
Did.
All right.
I mean,
I can't hate on the
games.
Listen, I can't hate. Oxygen is too good.
Not what. Yeah. Although, like, we've been watching the same Oxygen and TSM games, and TSM's been looking good. I mean, this is still Oxygen Esports, and they look unstoppable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, Oxygen is the best team in the league. I stand by that opinion.
Okay. Final thoughts, words of the wise. So I'm going to put you on the spot again, Roy. We're going to finish every single one of these episodes right now with wisdom words. So what do you have?
Words of wisdom?
Yep.
He who swings first always wins. That's my words. That's my word of my wisdoms.
And
my daily wisdom.
Hopefully for all of these teams this week, he who swings first will win the duel. But if not, hopefully we'll have a teammate to be able to trade it out. Those are the fundamentals you need. So that's it for us here for Spike Down episode number 8. See you next week for episode number 9. This is Van Sil and Roy. Seeing you. Sayonara.